Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, if I am poor, unemployed, and addicted to cocaine, then I think it's government and a prerogative for the state to make me stop, not just induce my delusion and literally continue wrecking my life. Contrary to popular belief, things can get worse, and there are a lot of bad things in status quo like child trafficking, prostitution, people who commit crime, and following the rhetoric of the previous speaker, because these things can't be controlled, bahala na, we'll just allow all of these things to proliferate. That literally wrecks your society. That is because the destruction of lives, especially for the youth and especially for the poor, who they claim to be able to help, put them in a trap of literally harming their entire future when a lot of these drugs are highly addictive and used and abused in recreational purposes like ecstasy or shabu or cocaine. We think the worst forms of these harms because of that addiction are irreversible in its worst case, or in its mildest form, give these people a misconstrued dopamine hit which otherwise makes them reliant on these things, costing them a lot of money and a lot of time. And also, if the state were to allow these things, it's fair to assume that maybe the state would allow these things to be done in a proliferated and cheap manner. You literally wreck society. These are quite different compared to like fast food, nicotine, and alcohol, because in as much as these things are addictive, they're not instantaneously deadly. When young people, because they have a pre-existing condition or a comorbidity, or maybe they're allergic, take a wrong dosage of these dirty drugs, even if these things can potentially be regulated, literally can lead them to get asphyxiation and literally die. More people die on their side of the house. Because just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. This is a policy debate, and even if their side has fiat to say that they can do it, they haven't given us enough mechanism or analysis in terms of why this would be done well. It was assertive at best. And even if these things are done well and distributed well, it violates the principle of state paternalism, wherein the state literally has a duty to be a safeguard, especially for these vulnerable and marginalized people, to not cook them for all eternity. What do we want on our side of the house? Number one, we're willing to defend status quo, an all-out ban against all of these things. We're maybe willing to be able to defend a gray area of things, maybe like marijuana, but given that marijuana is a gateway drug to all of these very harmful and synthetically lab-created hard drugs, that's exactly where we draw the line. Secondly, obviously, there are some medical and commercial uses, like using fentanyl or using heroin in hospitals, or even in instances of having to use ketamine to treat animals. We're not going to have this blanket legalization of all drugs of which they become commercially accessible. Thirdly, we're going to use every lever of the criminal justice system to crack down on these offenders. And maybe we can, in some instances, decriminalize these things, which, by the way, are different and they have false matter. Canada does not legalize all drugs. In fact, similar to America and broadly speaking North America, there's a huge crackdown and war on these particular things. 3 things I'm going to prove in my speech. Number 1, why even if we can do this well, this is a bad idea. Number 2, why this proportionately is too risky in terms of the bad things that happen that come as a consequence of addiction and long-term harm to people. And number 3, why the state has a duty, because this is a policy, to be able to prevent these things from happening, and contrary to what they mention, not just allow these to proliferate. Other responses will be included. The first thing I have to say is that a lot of these drugs are inherently dangerous. Things like methamphetamine, things like cocaine, things like anthrax, bath salts, crocodile, all of these different things literally are synthetically created in a lab and can lead to a lot of overdose. Sure, just because you legalize it doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to be able to follow its usage. Case in point in status quo, a lot of people are already feeling the significant harms of being addicted to alcohol and being addicted to tobacco, which, by the way, are mild substances compared to these which literally can kill you. Yes, POI.
If people have the urge within them to be addicted to these drugs, how on earth will a ban or whatever the comparative is of solve that urge that exists in human beings?
Because we make it less accessible, and if they do it, then they go to jail. On your side, you give them the very bad thing they're addicted to and literally wreck their life. The comparative is putting these people in rehab or being able to give them the proper psychological and medical treatment to get help, not enabling their kind of addiction. The intuition pump I have is gambling, right? Like, a lot of these poor people are kind of wrecked by gambling. Should we just lift all the fetters to gambling and allow them to just be able to do it? Kasi on their side, the rhetoric is, gagawin naman nila yan, so let's just allow them to do it. The second thing I'm going to say is the highly addictive nature of these chemicals, which disproportionately harm the vulnerable youth and poor people who on their side they claim to care about. Even if these things are done well, there are three specific harms to this that serve as mechanistic material. Number one, the perverse incentive of big pharma to be able to monopolize these things and get people even more addicted so they earn profit. Number two, the risk of state perversion through regulatory capture. Guys, we're in the Philippines. What happens if this happens here? If even in North America or in Europe, the most sophisticated societies in the world literally cannot contain or literally cannot regulate the fettered use of this in any form of meaningful way. And number three, the legalization of this literally creates demand. So you have other people who otherwise aren't addicted now being able to get access because they tried it in a party, literally being able to ruin their life as a consequence of being exposed to this. Ladies and gentlemen, there are other better, healthier coping mechanisms like making friends, having a hobby, going out, exercising that are free, that are better, that are more effective dopamine ways as opposed to these perversions. Very proud to win from side opposition.